All right, we're going to go ahead and get started again. Hopefully you had enough time to run and re-energize for this next segment. We're going to kick it off this hour with Andrew Sermani. He is, as I mentioned earlier, the CEO of Soundhouse. He's located down in Los Angeles. He's a past president of the Jazz Education Network, and additionally, he previously was with Alfred Publishing as the chief marketing officer there, and he runs a graduate program in music industry studies down at Cal State Northridge. Andrew, welcome. So Andrew, you know, a lot of the questions that we've been getting over the last several weeks as educators are tackling trying to, you know, create music online, performing music, distributing music, recording videos of music, is of course the legality of that, and how, you know, what do they need to be worried about, what kind of budget do they need to have, you know, and things like that. So but before we get into that, you know, we need to first address how to even distribute the music to start with. If your students aren't, you know, if you're not able to meet with them in person, obviously you're going to need to get them PDFs, some version of the charts of the music, the sheet music, and you know, an LMS is typically going to be the best way to do that, right? And so, what are your recommendations on that?
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say, you know, copyright, understanding copyright, it's very complicated. I've been in it for 32 years and it's still hard to understand, and it's changing all the time. So I think just overall, if you're trying to do the right thing and you make a mistake, it's okay. It's okay. The problem comes in when people just blatantly copy things without distributing it, because we're music educators. We are in a creative art, and we want to show that there's value in that art. So we want to be on the side of creators and let them know that, you know, that intellectual property is important, and it helps drive that. And it was part of the Constitution, you know, so it was so important that the founding fathers included in the Constitution. So in terms of a learning management system, most of you probably have one that's already assigned to you at your school. In most cases, you don't really have a choice on what you use. You're going to be either given Canvas or Google Classroom or Blackboard Learn or Schoology or Docebo or Edmodo or Moodle or Brightspace or Tavoti. And there's also a newer program called Ambi, which is it's for more of like a social interaction in a closed environment. Think of it as like kind of a safe Facebook in a closed platform where you can communicate with your students, etc. So whether you're using one of those programs or you want to try to use them, what you want to do is be able to communicate with your students. You have to be able to have an easy way to communicate with them. Many of those platforms have easy ways for them to get notifications, whether it be text or email, and control how. So it's an easy way to get information out. You want to put assignments on there because students want to know, well, what am I supposed to do today? They want to be able to go to one place on either the web or their app for those programs and find out what the assignment is. They're going to be needing to record their assignment and upload it into the platform. You're going to need to distribute music through there. You're going to need to put MP3 files, PDFs, all those kinds of stuff. So you have one central place where you can communicate. So any of those platforms are really good for that. Now let's talk about the copyright aspects of this. The good thing is that the Copyright Act of 1976, which was the last major copyright act passed, has certain educational exemptions. They understood that they were warranted for operating in a classroom setting. So the basic exemption for distance education permits performances and displays of copyrighted works for distance education instruction without a need to obtain a license or rely on fair use. Now, it's not completely open-ended, and I'll talk about the restrictions in that, but there is the general understanding from that Copyright Act that we have to address this. The terms performance and display refer to actions taken either in the physical classroom or the digital classroom. It's not related to performing music in public. That's a whole separate thing. So this 1976 Copyright Act was updated in 2002 by the Technology Education Copyright Harmonization Act. It's called the TEACH Act. And it's very easy. If you Google NAFME TEACH Act, it'll take you right to the link to that explanation on off of NAFME's website, which gives details. But here are the basic rules for legally obtaining music, and this applies to accredited nonprofit educational institutions. This is important, accredited nonprofit educational institutions. So it needs to be directly related to the teaching content of the transmission. It needs to be made by an instructor. It needs to be offered as a regular part of instructional activities. It should not be accessible to students any longer than the class session. The school should create policies regarding copyright and copyright protection to show that they're educating. Once again, if they're promoting illegal use of stuff, that's grounds for getting in trouble with the publishers and any legal issues. So you want to make sure you're always in an environment of trying to educate everybody. So you show that you're trying to comply with copyright law, even if you don't understand all the details of that. You may replicate, purchase physical or digital products that you have purchased for whole class instruction. That's very important. You can't take a copy from your friend, make a copy of that, and transfer that to your students. It has to be something that you already purchased, that you have in your possession, and then you are duplicating it to put on your learning management system for your students to access. If you do that, then that's legal according to the TEACH Act. Digital usage of purchased physical products is permitted provided you control the distribution to only the same students for whom you have purchased the physical product. Digital distribution cannot replace purchasing music, but you may distribute purchased music digitally. Now, if a digital version of the work is available already online, then an analog copy cannot be converted for educational use. Related to demo recordings or rehearsal tracks or student recordings, they may be created and distributed provided you control the distribution to only the students registered for the class.
So Andrew,
yeah.
This is a lot of jargon here. So let's boil this down just so it makes sense. So basically, if I buy the piece of sheet music, I'm able to distribute that to the students, and I'm going to be okay to do that, correct?
Yes, correct.
And I'm also going to be able to, based on what you were just saying, on the recording, I'm able to distribute the recording to my students, which we're going to be using as the reference recording, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. And I'm fine to do that as
Absolutely.
an educator as well.
Yes.
Now you did just say that if there's a digital version of the sheet music available, you can't use digital. You can't create a digital copy from the hard copy. So if I've already purchased a piece of music and there's a digital version available, I have to repurchase that piece of music. Is that correct?
No, you're covered if you've already purchased the music. But we're just talking about being able to distribute something that you don't have a copy of digitally.
Okay, great.
Great. Let's see. Use of purchased sheet music in online videos is permitted when used as an extension of a whole class instruction. Video should only be available to your class, not shared with others. This is a really big area because everybody's making videos now. And there's a certain license required with videos that is different than other licenses. It's known as a synchronization license because you're synchronizing music with visual images. So you have to be careful. You can share videos in a closed system, but once you post something on a public site, then you're crossing over into needing a synchronization license. So that's important to know. Any digitization of physical material should include the relevant copyright information, which is on the part already. All the copyright notices are at the bottom of the part. And always inform students about the proper way to handle copyrighted works transmitted to them. A work produced or marketed primarily for performance or display as part of a mediated instruction activities is not covered. So in other words, if it's some digital system already that's out on the internet, there's several digital programs, or, Quaver, for example, you're not allowed to copy that because it's available in that platform. So, so what is not allowed, this is very important too, is if a work was not purchased, then you should not use it and distribute it to your students. It needs to be purchased first. And then only distribute materials to students for whom you have paid for the materials. And lastly, just because a work is available online and free does not mean that a work is a legal copy. There's a lot of illegal copies posted on websites. So
really, that can't be true. I was able to purchase the entire Gordon Goodwin big band catalog for $7. Gordon, isn't that true that that's totally legal?
Actually, there's sites in Russia you can get our whole albums for like $1 for all 10 tracks, $1. And you try to take them down, and it's like playing whack-a-mole. So
right.
I don't know, Andrew. I am just dizzy with the complexities of these regulations. Like, we don't have, as educators now, enough to deal with having to sort through all of that. I mean, I've been working in that, in that world to some degree for decades, and I just went ready to throw my hands up.
Yeah. Well, don't throw your hands up. I think there's a lot.
I don't know if I'm expressing the feelings of other people watching. And what I can't post a video on YouTube unless I get a license to somebody. Man, I get these requests all the time from people. Can I use your song and post it, and I always give it gratis because that's what it's an important thing to do for education. But I'm wondering if there's some sort of a mechanism that needs to be set up to enable educators to know, and maybe maybe this is the first step in that process. Provide a guideline to go through this maze.
There's actually a very good system related to videos that the Soundhouse uses that we're partnering with, and that's known as the Spin Network. And what they do is they have relationships with all the publishers, and they can probably clear 90 to 95% of all the copyrights for synchronization usage, and you don't have to worry about that. If you tried to go get a sync license, you'd pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but you can post it on their site and they will clear the licenses. Now, people are going to need to subscribe to that to watch it, but then everyone gets covered. Gordon Goodwin is a creator. He makes his living creating content. He's got all that wonderful, expensive gear right behind him that he's got to buy and all that stuff. And so if we just copy the stuff that he produces for us, then he can't do that. We would have to go get another job. So we want to support creators as music educators.
And nobody wants that.
Well, I have no other skill set, so that's really not a possibility.
I like how Andrew's justification for this is that you've got all that expensive equipment that we need to pay for.
I'll take whatever grace you can hand over.
Yeah, right. Well, anyways, now, as Gordon was saying, Andrew's super complex, but the good news in all of this is for these educators that are on with us today and that might be watching this later, they can feel assured that they're covered legally if it's music they've purchased and distribute to their students, correct?
Yes, and it's controlled within their students. It can't go outside of that system to other schools or other teachers and all that stuff. If they're in that teaching environment, then they're protected by the 76 Copyright Act and also the Teach Act.
Yeah.
But they've just got to follow those guidelines, and it's not difficult. It makes sense. It makes logical sense.
Of course it does. And one thing, as you know, Andrew, that we do here at the Soundhouse to kind of further protect ourselves is just as we distribute the music, we only share the individual part with that one player. So we're not giving access to the entire piece of music to each member of the ensemble. They're each only getting one part in the same way that they would in an in-person situation, and that avoids any kind of distribution of the entire work, which of course we want to avoid. We are getting a little bit behind, so we're gonna move on. Gordon, and Gordon, I know we've got you coming back on here in just a little bit to kind of show us what a rehearsal would actually look like. But you've had experience now. You're one of the few on the planet that's been running online rehearsals and with great success since the start of COVID. And so for that reason, we wanted to bring you on to share some of your expertise. Now, I realize that probably you don't need any introduction with most of the participants on here today, but I do want to share, for those of you that, that may not be aware of his work, Gordon is a multi-Grammy winning composer, artist, fantastic world-class saxophonist, pianist, and leader of Gordon Goodwin's Big Fat Band. He works extensively in the film industry, and there he is. Look at that, with the artwork and all. So Gordon, thank you for spending some time with us on a Saturday and sharing your knowledge with these educators. But would you mind chiming in for just a few minutes, and then you'll get a chance to expound more here next hour. But in your experience running ensembles online this spring and summer, what are some of the things that have worked for you as far as engaging the students, being able to connect with them, being able to have success in this online format?
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. Well, we started this back in late May or late March or April, and at that time we were just trying to get into this new paradigm, and I talked to the students and said, I don't know what we're going to do, but I was able to engage them as trailblazers, because that's really what's happening right now. We are living in historic times. Not only, you know, we're in the world in general, but specifically for music education. And it's, I think, a time we can use to pivot to something better. And, but as far as working on the internet, the first thing that I realized was that I had to work harder to connect with these kids. I'm looking at a screen just like this, and the internet is just as a rule is kind of a floaty kind of environment. You know, we get on, we just kind of surf around, and we're answering emails over to Twitter, and we just, before you know it, hours gone by, 2 hours, and these kids are used to that. So I think that we have to provide a semblance of some sort of structure for them as they go into this environment. So at Soundhouse, we came up with some guidelines in terms of their decorum. When they come here to this sacred space where we talk about music, we have expectations. The first is you get dressed. You don't come into pajamas or your sweats. You dress with respect for what you're doing. You center yourself in front of your camera, close enough that we can see you, we can read you, your body language. You don't multitask, you're not on your phone, not during this time. You don't eat, you don't chat. You try to talk to your family and say, okay, mom and dad, I need a space where I can go to my music class and have uninterrupted, so I don't have like activity in the background distracting me from focusing on this very important thing we're trying to do. So we had a list of those kind of expectations for the students. And some of them may be obvious, but it really has helped if you say them out loud and get them to agree to it. The other thing, and Caleb mentioned it earlier, was about accountability. Because what I've tried to do with my students is to get them to be participants with me, so that they are, I don't want to tell them that note's wrong. You're playing that rhythm wrong. I want to talk about nuance. I want to talk about style. I want to talk about lifting the notes off the page. So this is a long-term project, you know, I realize for some students at some level, but the students I worked with got to that point where they put the microscope on themselves a little more closely, so that I didn't have to say those kind of things. It's a matter of establishing an online culture, what we would do if we were in the same room in the band room. But now we're having to do it here. So I do spend time with them, 10 minutes at the time, and we talk about them. We talk about current events. We talk about things like intellectual property rights. We talk about what music they've heard that they might have enjoyed. We sometimes talk about, well, how was your day, Susan? Tell me what happened. And then I've had a level of connection and intimacy through that process that is carried over to our music making. So I think that's been an extraordinary thing, but I did notice that I had to really project my energy in a committed way, more so than I do if I'm just in the same room. I have to really project my passion, my intent, to keep them all there. And once in a while, I'll see a student and he's kind of sitting back, and or maybe he's sitting in low light, and I got to call him out. Quit hiding from me. We all know those kids, right? Sitting in the back of the classroom, you know, they're a little bit scared. What I want to impart is that it's an honor. It's a privilege to have music in your life. Now, I know a lot of these students are, if you're in the middle school, even high school age, they're still getting their brains assembled. You know, neurons are still connecting and all that stuff. But I think if we set that example of expectations, I talk to my kids, and they always talk about the teachers they like. Oh, yeah, he's cool. Well, why is he cool? Well, he doesn't hassle us. It seems to always be translated as the teacher that doesn't expect that much. I would like to propose that we become the teachers, and a lot of times music education is in that category because music is fun. Of course it's fun. But fun does not have to signify a lack of commitment and work. So if we set high expectations for them. And when I started this a couple months ago, Caleb, I was probably too easy on them because I'm like, okay, we're all under stress because of COVID. We're on the internet. We just don't know what we're doing. And I finally kind of had to ramp it up and say, okay, it's time. Are we doing this? Or are we not doing this? So I think that's maybe something we consider as educators. Maybe we assign too much work for now. Because too much work, I think, becomes the norm and the kids step into it. I'm really convinced of that. And that we insist that the arts and music education are as important, and you can make a case that they're more important now more than ever. So the final thing that I would say before I turn this back over to Caleb is that sitting and talking to the kids and espousing my wisdom is not gonna cut it. You gotta get the horns on the faces. And with, you know, I mean, I had a group of 20 musicians. If you've got a concert band on a big Zoom session, this presents a whole nother level of logistical problems. But I had to get the kids playing, and we can't play together simultaneously, not yet, but we can play sequentially. So I worked out different things that I would have the kids do. Like I'd have the lead trumpet player play 4 or 8 bars. I'd make some comments, he'd play it again. And then I'd say, okay, how about trumpet 2? Emulate what he did. And then I'd have the lead trumpet player give his feedback to the second trumpet player, the second trumpet player to the third. And so kids are at attention at all times. So it's not like they're just sitting waiting for when it's their turn, you know, in the barrel. So I think that there are creative ways for us to find ways to play. And we're going to talk about some of the other things I've did in my later sessions today. But I would ask you to dare to be that teacher that is thought of to be a hard ass now, but years down the line is remembered as that's the one that changed it for me. That's the teacher that gave me what I needed, that gave the gift of music to me, and it changed my life.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Gordon. And, you know, thank you for responding to the call back in March when we had this crazy idea of trying to keep music education going through online rehearsals and being willing to dive in. And it's been fantastic to watch your ensembles online and what they've been able to accomplish. So, and we'll bring you back here just in just a moment. But right now, we are going to keep pushing ahead because we are a little bit behind, and bring on one of our fantastic members of our office team here at the Sound House, Emma Jensen. And Emma, you know, we want to really make sure everybody feels comfortable, these directors, being able to take this, you know, process all the way from beginning to end. So we've talked about, you know, getting set up on their web conferencing software, picking a DAW platform for them to be able to record on. Now, once they decide, you know, on a program, whether it's BandLab or Soundtrap, and it's time to get started, how are they going to do that? How do these directors get files set up for their musicians?
Great. So once you've got everything set up, you'll want to create files inside of BandLab or Soundtrap, whatever you're using in your DAW. And to do this, it's just really easy. You just import the file or the MP3 or reference track that you have. let me just show you really quick if I can share my screen.
And we'll talk just in a minute with Daniel is going to be joining us to talk about, you know, being able to load on a reference track and some of the challenges there. So we can get into that.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. So yeah, he will teach you how you're going to import these tracks in here. But it's important to realize that some of these DAWs have limitations. So BandLab, you can't have more than 16 tracks within a session. So what you'll actually need to do is create separate session files for each of your sections. So at the Soundhouse, we usually recommend that you do it by section, say violin 1, violin 2, if you're an orchestra. Winds and brass might have their own separate section. And they'll record in these sections up to 16 tracks, like we said. But once you finish it, you'll want to mix these down as a single file and then put them into a master session. So all you have to do is go up here, download it, and mix it down.
Great. Can we back up for just a second, Emma, realizing that a lot of these directors probably have never even seen a DAW before, at least many of them. And if you could just use your cursor there to show everybody, first of all, what we're looking at here is a song file. So this is what we call a session. And you'll notice here that there are different lines. If you look over to the left, maybe you can move your cursor over there and show each of those lines, there's a name and an instrument associated with it. And now each of those lines represents a track. So when when Emma says that there's a 16 track limit, that means we're limited to 16 of these lines, whether that's individuals or since all of the recordings we're going to be doing require a reference track for us to lock the musicians onto, the students, the maximum that you're going to be able to have in a session itself is actually 15 players. And then from there, Emma, you were talking about doing a mix down. So did you want to keep, talking about that?
So if you look at this example, I guess this is my string quartet. And so each of these is our parts. So I put my name and my part. So like Caleb said, you can have up to 15 of these because that top one is our reference track, which includes the click. So say we're part of a bigger ensemble and we want to put this into a bigger file. When you go here and you download it and mix it down, you'll be brought to a window that looks like this, and it will let you download the MP3 or a WAV file, depending on what you prefer. And you'll need to export this, download it, and then you'll create a new session file and you'll upload it into it. But it'll put all of these 16 tracks that you have into a single audio file. So you could have one for first violins, one for second violins, one for violas, cello, just like that. And then in that way, you can put the entire ensemble into one session and you can hear the final result.
Wonderful. That's great. Just to reiterate, for those of you tuning in with us, you saw earlier that Nick was showing that on some of these DAWs, you could have up to 200 tracks. And you might think to yourself, boy, it would be wonderful if I didn't have that track limitation. I could put my entire ensemble in one file. However, you can imagine, based on what Emma was just showing us, if you had an 80-piece wind ensemble and you had to manage 80 of those lines, it would get very cumbersome and very confusing. So it really is not a limitation at all, I don't believe, to have that track limit, because that's about the number of tracks that are comfortable to work with on screen. Would you agree with that, Emma?
Exactly. So in Soundtrap, you actually can have up to, I think, 99 tracks, but the CPU you're going to need to load that is going to be really, it's just not feasible for anybody. So you are still going to want to break it down into smaller sections, regardless of whatever DAW system you're using.
Wonderful. So we have a question from Vicky that I want to address right now in the Q&A. She's saying, what does it mean, mix it down? So again, Vicky, as Emma was talking about, basically a mix down is taking that entire section. So if we were taking the clarinet section of a wind ensemble and there were 10 clarinets, and we wanted to put our entire wind ensemble together, we would mix down those clarinet tracks, and it basically condenses the sound from, if we had 11 players, from 11 tracks, it condenses it down or mixes it down to one track. And that track we can put with the other sections so that we have an entire ensemble. So hopefully that helps answer that question for you. Emma, thank you so much for helping us understand that piece of it. Let's see, do we have Daniel online with us yet? Looks like we're still waiting for Daniel. So I want to just go ahead and actually, before we get into that, yeah, you're welcome, Vicki. This is where we're starting to get into more of the nuts and bolts of the technology. Does anybody have any questions as we are getting started and discussing this? And again, realize that we're going to spend, you know, the next couple hours working in this BandLab format. So I think you're going to get more comfortable, you know, as we're going through it with what you're looking at. James has a question: is Emma showing an assignment or a my project? James, hopefully we can answer your question there. Basically, Emma, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So that was a project that was in BandLab. It's not an assignment for BandLab for Education. That platform is going to be a little different. When you're setting up those files on that end of things, what you'll do is basically create a session which will be called an assignment, and then you'll assign it out to your students. And for collaboration purposes, you'll need to assign them into groups. So you'll basically divide them into sections: group 1, group 2, group 3. And when you assign them that assignment, that session basically will be collaborative among those students. But yeah, what I just showed was a project on the normal platform of BandLab.
Great. And Donna's asking if BandLab is accessible on phones. Currently, BandLab is accessible on phones, but BandLab EDU, the EDU site, is not. Emma, do you know, I know we've been working directly with BandLab on that. Have they given any kind of a date for that, for students to be able to access it on their phones?
We don't have a current date of, it's one of their top priorities, but we don't know when that's going to be ready yet. So if you have a school that needs, for certain, they need to use the mobile app, either you'll need to use the BandLab, the normal platform, or Soundtrap for Education does have an app that is workable and very feasible for. Yes, and again, the only downside there, of course, is there is a fee for Soundtrap EDU. Yeah, so you need to be aware of that. Okay, wonderful. So let's go ahead and talk about the reference tracks. And I think Daniel's going to be joining us soon. But I want to just kind of get into talking about that a little bit. Emma, can you go ahead and share your screen again? Actually, if we have a BandLab, do you have an actual BandLab session you can pull up so they can see what that looks like and sounds like with a reference track? And while you're pulling that up, I'm just going to talk a little bit. As we talked about, the way that the students are going to be able to record their rehearsal tracks is to be able to line that up with a reference track. And so what we're going to do is actually take a recording, which oftentimes is going to be available, as Andrew mentioned, from the publishers. You know, for example, if you buy a piece of music from J.W. Pepper, a lot of times they have the sample recording there. Or you may have a professional recording. But the first thing that we want to do when we set up a recording session is to bring in that reference track. So Emma, can you just go ahead and play only the reference track on this this session that you've got here? Oh, you're muted. Okay, I think she's pulling that up. Make sure. I need to reshare it so that we can hear it. So just
have the audio. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay, so let's just solo that reference track.
Great. So the first thing that we'll want to do is to bring that reference track in and then lock it into the click track. I'm going to talk about that for a minute. And Emma, it sounds like Daniel is just waiting for the link to be sent to him. So if you can send that over to him, then to join us, then he's going to take us through a little bit some of these challenges that the educators might run into on this. Or Sharon, if you can send that invite over to Daniel, that'd be great. But basically, that reference track, once you bring that in, you'll notice that there's a little metronome at the top of the screen there. And we have the ability to set the metronome tempo to be able to line up with the reference track. So that's the first thing you're going to want to do, is make sure that you're lined up tempo-wise with that. Once the reference track is in there, then the musicians are going to be able to start recording their own tracks with along with that reference track and the click. Just again, to make sure we all know the same terminology. I'm sorry, I apologize. Some of us that have been working in this for a while just assume everybody knows everything. So if we're using any terms that you don't recognize, please let us know in the Q&A or the chat so we can address them. But when we talk about the click, we're just mainly referring to that metronome sound, the click that would go along with the track, and that allows the musicians to be able to do that. Now, Marcy is asking, is this in every DAW? Yes, every DAW, you'll have the ability to bring in a reference track, and you'll definitely have the ability to have a click. Now, one of the challenges that you might face in this is, what if you don't have an actual recording? And Daniel Baldwin, another one of our team members here at the Sound House, is going to address that and some of the other challenges you might have. Daniel, you're muted right now, but if you could jump in and kind of maybe give us some of the options that directors might have if they don't have a recording of the track.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you great. Yes.
Wonderful.
Thanks
Great.
for joining us.
Mm-hmm. So there's a few different options if you don't already have a reference track to put into your DAW. I do know many publishing companies will provide their own reference track for this very purpose. Another option, and because of the educational use of this, I believe it fits within the legal requirements.
Yeah.
Right, correct. Let's see, can I share my screen?
You sure can.
All right. So here I've pulled up a chart by Victor Lopez, and this process is just downloading audio from a YouTube video. So pretty much all it is you copy the link. I use a website. It's ytmp3.cc. There are many websites that fulfill this purpose, and there are also programs that you can download, which is offline on your computer. I note there are some websites that are a little more sketchy in this field, but this one I've found to be very reliable. So I just copy that in here. I download the audio, and then if I go on to BandLab, so I can open this project here. On the score here, I can see the tempo is 152. So assuming that the recorded audio is exactly that, I can just set the tempo to 152. And then drop that in. Whoops, okay. So we'll listen to that. I'll turn on the metronome as well. Can you hear my audio?
Yes, we can hear it great.
Okay. So from here, it might not immediately line up, you may have covered this a bit, Caleb, but you just want to find where in this audio waveform the beat is, essentially, and then line that up with the metronome manually. You may have to do a bit of that. So let's see. So the horns come in on just on beat 1, so that's right here in the waveform. So if I line that up with, say, the 3rd bar, little, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, so now it's lined up with the metronome.
Daniel,
Yes?
so,
Mhm.
first of all, just something that I like to do here, and I'd love to hear from Gordon chiming in on this as well, but, it's really helpful for me when I'm working on a track, being able to find things is to be able to make sure those measure numbers up top line up. So if you look at the top of the screen, everybody, you'll see those numbers. Right now it's under the number 11. Those are actually bars of 4/4 time. And so when I'm bringing in the reference track, I like to try to delete any space before the reference track starts, so I can, it just makes it easier to be able to find my spot in the score. Gordon, is that something you'd recommend as well?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And one of the other things that you'll notice when we get into BandLab, sometimes students, if they don't play until bar 10, say, they'll wait and they will go into record right before bar 10, so their waveform will start there as opposed to bar 1, beat 1. And so in the professional environment, all audio files must start at the same point, which is bar 1, beat 1. So there are ways that in most DAWs, even if you start recording there, you can then bounce it in a way that you include bar 1 as your left point, And so all these technical, considerations are something, for better or for worse, you're going to have to get some degree of understanding about. Because, and I'm going to talk about this in my segment coming up about sometimes the frustrations of having parts in BandLab that aren't quite syncing for some reason, and you can't tell. Is it the students did they play it this sloppily, or is it a technical thing? Did they not get inputted into the program correctly? So we're looking at technology and performance that are merging, and we have to somehow be able to separate them sometimes.
Great, yeah. Now, Daniel, there's a question from Donna. If your reference track is a recording with rubato and accelerando, in other words, it's a floating tempo, will the DAW automatically adjust the click? And the answer is, of course, no, it will not. And this is one of the challenging things, especially since, when we're talking about concert band and symphonic music, rarely are we going to have a static tempo throughout. So before you talk about the process for adding a floating click, can you talk about the process if this particular track that you brought in, Sabor Cuba, it happens to be that they recorded it to a click track, obviously, because it locks in. But if some of these directors are using a reference, a reference track that's older, that was not recorded to a click, or let's talk about that first. What are their options as far as getting a track that maybe has, like, it's a constant tempo, but it floats a little bit, right? So it's a constant tempo marking, I should say, but the tempo wanders a little bit. What are their options for getting that straightened out?
Right. So as Caleb described, sometimes when they recorded this track in the studio, they did not record to a click track or a metronome. In this case, and I believe for most recordings provided by the publisher, it will be recorded to a click track, so you don't really need to worry about the tempo fluctuating at all along with the metronome. So the process for there is a process for manipulating the audio of a reference track, just nudging the beats around and kind of stretching things around so that it will fit with the metronome. And I'll kind of just verbally explain the
Yeah, and I
process.
don't think you need to go too
Yeah.
far into it right now because of time, but just maybe so they
Yeah.
understand what the process would be.
Right. So there are several DAWs that you can do this in. I use Reaper, which you can do this in. It works very well. You can also do this in Ableton, and I'm sure there are other solutions as well. But essentially, what it is you can put a marker where the beat is in the music, and then by stretching that to the grid line of the metronome, it will kind of stretch and manipulate the audio, make certain areas a little bit slower, maybe a little bit faster, so that everything ends up being perfectly with the metronome, but it still sounds totally normal, pretty much. So for the purpose of a reference track, that would be the process that you need to go through in order to get it lined up with the metronome.
Yeah.
And that's something that we regularly do with EdTech as well.
Yeah. So just again to kind of make sure everybody understands why this is important. If you have if you put in a reference track that's not on a click, it makes it very difficult for the students to be able to line things up in the recording. It's very much you want to be able to have that opportunity to have the click. Now, so that's why it would be important if the reference track you're using is not exactly on a grid or lining up to a metronome. You do want to manipulate that file so that you can do that. Now, in the case that you've got a piece with changing tempos, that gets a little bit trickier, but it's still very doable. And Daniel, I'll explain a little bit about where EdTech would come in to play here, but can you just explain just briefly the process of what that involves?
Right. So there are other ways to create your own click tracks, essentially. And in many DAWs, in pretty much any DAW, you can change the tempo within the program, and it'll change the metronome speed at that particular point. BandLab, I believe, is a little bit more limited that way. But yeah, there are ways to make your own audio track that is the click track, so you don't even need to worry about the built-in metronome in the DAW. And that would be useful for creating click tracks going for rubato sections and areas where the time is fluctuating. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, just to clarify, in the case that you're working on a symphonic project that has multiple tempos or rubato sections, what you would actually want to do is to create a separate click track that goes along with it that has the floating tempo in it for the students to line up to. Now, I just saw a question come through. Why don't you just skip the click track? And if you get in and start working with these programs and try to have a rehearsal session without a click track, you'll find the answer to that very quickly. It's very difficult for students to try to line up without having that metronome
Yes.
grid to be able to do that. So it really makes it literally about 10 times harder for the students to try to record their rehearsal parts without being able to have that. Donna is saying she's a high school choir director that doesn't want to sacrifice the level of musical difficulty for the sake of providing a virtual final product. And Donna, I can assure you, as you'll see, as Gordon talks about the rehearsal process, you absolutely do not need to sacrifice anything in regards to the level of music difficulty. Here at the Sound House, we're really doing fully professional level recordings and difficulty of music. And in fact, it's actually a really, maybe even a better format to be able to work on those difficult pieces. So, yeah, so anyways,
Absolutely.
really some fantastic questions there. Gordon, were you wanting to chime in on that?
I'm going to lead off my next segment with a little more on this topic.
Okay.
So.
Great. Well, Daniel, I want to thank you for chiming in and helping us understand that. Now, this is probably a great spot before we bring Gordon on to mention, we didn't talk about this at the beginning, but this team right here, Sound House EdTech, we do provide services to assist directors on this. We want to be able to, we want to show you everything that we do on our end today, that so that you could, if you had the time and the interest level, that you could do it on your own. We want to make sure everybody has access to this. If you wanted to save some time and you don't have the bandwidth to get up to speed on some of these things like creating a floating click track, or finding reference recordings that you don't have access to, or creating the final product of mixing the audio and the video, that's actually what we do. We don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that today, but all of you that are involved today, we will be sending you information if it's a service to you and would save you time and money to be able to use our services. Certainly they're there and available, and we'd love to do that for you. But some of the things we do outsource for directors is help you set up the files in your DAW. We help you get the reference tracks in, line them up with the click tracks, or create click tracks if they're needed, mix down the audio, mix the video, and things like that. So just so you know, that is what we do, and we're here to help you on that. But certainly all those things are things that if you have enough interest, that you could do on your own, and we want to make sure that you have as many tools as you possibly can. With that being said, Gordon, would love to have you tell us a little bit more about the rehearsal process and how a rehearsal looks. Of course, we all saw when COVID hit, all of a sudden we saw these videos popping up all over the internet of school choirs or concert bands or jazz bands with the Brady Bunch videos. And how is what you've been doing? Can you explain how is the rehearsal process different from maybe what we've been seeing on Facebook and on YouTube? How is this process different?
Okay, yeah, I would definitely get into that. Before I do, though, if you'd allow me just to talk for just a few minutes about the issue of click tracks. And Caleb talked an hour ago about how there are some things we cannot do in this platform. Some things that we do intuitively when we're making music with others. And chief amongst them is variable time, and to allow the music to breathe the way it should. And I did a track with the Big Fat Band a few years ago, and we were syncing to an Oscar Peterson track that he played with his trio. So I had to go and create a click track that matched their tempo through about a 5-minute performance. And I noticed they were playing the song On Green Dolphin Street. And so if you know the song, da 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 da, and then this part, da 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 da, and every time they got to that part of the song where it went up a minor third, they would speed up a little bit, and then they'd settle back da da at the A section every time. And as I was programming the click, I realized this is a natural. It's almost physics or something, where music does that, and classical music does it a lot. Jazz and pop music less, but we noticed with the Fat Band that our performances are so much more natural feeling when we're not using a click. However, sometimes due to logistical issues and others, having that click is a lifeline. So I've seen some conductors do over the last 8 months. They will film a video of themselves conducting. So say you've got an introduction to your piece and it's free tempo. So they film a video and they sing one da 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 da, and they conduct, right? If it's for however long the intro is. And then they take that and they create a separate file in BandLab that's just the intro. That's it. So the students are concentrating, and I mean, sometimes there are some programs you can even have a video of him, but if nothing else, he can clap. Da, 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 da. So they have a reference that is created from the instincts of the conductor, and that allows the kind of rubato that sometimes is indispensable. You have to be clever about it, certainly. So there are ways to do it. I think that working in BandLab, and I'm going to share my screen here real quick and go to a BandLab file that that we worked with in Soundhouse. If I can find it here. Here it is. So we talked about the reference track, and you can see here. Here it is. Well, this is the click track that I made. I didn't use this click in BandLab. I made one in my own DAW, and we solo it. You can just hear. There it is. By the way, click, for those of you that may not be aware, the way it started was back in the early days of film, syncing film and music. Somebody figured out that if they took a little 3-hole punch and made a hole in the film at the side, it made a little click or a pop sound as it went through the sprockets. So they would put a hole every 10 frames. That became a 10-frame click. And the musicians could hear that sound, and that became the way that they would synchronize, to the track. We've evolved since then in how we do it, but it's still called a click track. So here's my click track, which syncs up with this, which is my reference track. And this is the Big Fat Band playing this song. Now, the students use these top 2 tracks when we're assembling this piece, but eventually they go away. We don't want them. We really want to have everybody here. Now, I can play a little bit of okay, so you can see that I've got everybody's, here's the bass player, here's my saxophone section here. You can see their waveforms, and this is an interesting thing about rehearsing in this environment. Our students are so visually oriented, aren't they? So I can say this figure right here where we're going, these little short, precise notes. Here's these dut-duts right here. You can see Damon playing here. Here's Jack. He's more or less right with Damon. I can put my cursor and I can see that Jack is a little bit late. I can show him that during rehearsal. And somehow the visual recognition of it clicks for the students in a way that having them use their ears does not. That was a revelation for me when I learned about it. Looking at these waveforms is informative in a lot of ways. Like, look at our lead trumpet player, Tanner. Look at his waveform right here. Look at that huge block of sound. Now, I pointed out to Tanner, you're distorted. Can you hear how distorted his part is? Let's solo it. Now, it is part of the other thing that we're going to have to start to deal with is as these students record at home, they're having to learn how to become audio engineers. This is one of the most frustrating things. All the equipment you see behind me, man, I went kicking and screaming to buying that stuff. I used this technology to learn how to write music. It never crashed, I never had to update it. I just had to sharpen it once in a while. So I had to learn how to deal with this tough stuff too. But in the end, it's made me a better composer. And it's my belief that this technology is going to make us better as well. So, however, I want to play you a little video that Jared made for me. And this is, I'm not going to play all of it. It's minutes long, but this is one of my rehearsals with my band. And we start to talk about the problems of synchronicity and recording music this way. Now you can see that we are here in BandLab in this video. We're doing a song called Hunting Wabbits, which is kind of a cappella to start off with that rhythm section. Let's play a few bars of this video. We got better. Flap, the flap, 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 flam, flam, flam. Okay, so I don't know what to tell you other than Jaden can do some surgery on it. And so it's da, 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 and all together. If you turn the click off, at least it's you can kind of give it a little more grace. Da, 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 da. Can you guys hear how that is just not really tight? Okay, so we spent time trying to determine, did they really play it that sloppily? Or did our waveforms get somehow misaligned in this program? Going back to the real BandLab program, look how easy it is for me to move a file. It's easy. It's easier to do it in BandLab than it is in Digital Performer, the program I use. You have to be deliberate to move a sound file in DP and most other DAWs. BandLab is pretty easy, and I think it's a little easy to accidentally nudge it. But this is how we do it. And so I had to go, and Jaden and I, we went into this thing and said, all right, da, 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 why is it not tight? You remember I talked a minute ago about how we really would like to have everybody's sound file starting from bar 1. All right, so we can just go back to here. And you can see Damon starts here, Jack starts here. You know, in a perfect world, and this might not even been our final version, you know, I would have created an audio file that starts here at bar 1. This leads me to another thing we need to talk about, which is about quantizing and auto-tuning. Quantizing is a term that we use that means lining things up rhythmically. We tell the computer, these are 8th notes, so line up those 8th notes so they are together. Much of pop music is heavily quantized. Obviously, it's also heavily auto-tuned. As an educator, you have a decision to make. Is it appropriate for me to distort what the students have done at this stage of their growth? What's your goal? Is your goal for this final performance to sound as good as possible? Or is it an honest representation of where they are, even if it doesn't sound as good as it should? This is a kind of an ethical question that musicians from on all levels of the business are grappling with, and it's an issue of taste. It's an issue of preference. I talk to the kids about it, and you know, what I do, if I've got a kid that he plays in tune 90% of the time, and there's one out of tune note, I'll say, you know what? Can you go fix the note? I don't care how you fix it. If he's got a DAW that he can tune it, probably it's quicker to tune it, and the workstations are so sophisticated, you cannot tell that it's been digitally tuned. Not anymore. It sounds perfect. Or plug your microphone in, set the click, punch in on that note, get it right. To me, it doesn't matter if they play it right or if they auto-tune it, as long as it's that they're not avoiding the responsibility to be able to play in tune, to be able to play in time. I think we still have to stress those values while embracing the technology for the good that it can do. But like any technology, it can also do harm if we use it in the wrong way. So that's a decision I think that is a moving target. There are plenty of people that will tell you that my band, the Big Fat Band, is overly precise. That's what everyone says. Oh, they're so tight. They're so. And I tell you, this is just how we play. Come hear us live. We fix things once in a while, but we mostly fix it because I can't afford to get Wayne Bergeron back in the studio just kind of correct one little thing that didn't go right. These records cost enough as it is. So sometimes they're pragmatic decisions that enter into your focus here. So it's a long, the concept of auto-tuning and quantizing is a long topic. We can talk about it in the Q&A later. The other thing that I really try to do is to get the students to not only learn how to play whatever song we're doing, but we work on things like ear training. When I'm in my Zoom session, I'll get my saxophone out and I'll say, okay, Johnny, here's your lick. And I'll play, da do da do da do dum ba. Now you play it. and so he or she will try to play that lick. I was surprised how difficult it was for them. I was surprised at the lack of connection between their brain, their ears, their fingers, and their chops. And I've seen it happen in the professional world as composers come into town. They didn't grow up composing playing in a band. They grew up in front of a computer. So they show up with a suitcase full of technical knowledge, and they're amazing at it. And they've got another suitcase full of musical knowledge, and it's light as a feather. We are out of balance because there's so much to try to learn. But guess what? That's our gig now. I don't want to have our understanding of this technology, and we need it, but I don't want it to mean we neglect the understandings of the nuts and bolts of what music means. I want these kids to understand that. So we spend 15 minutes, and I'll go, okay, now Ruth, here's your lick. Da 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 da. And sometimes a lick as simple as that, they can't even find the first note. So, but they got better as we went through our season. They got better and better at that. And you can come up with your own version of that. Maybe it's some mechanism you use to teach them music theory. Maybe it's some music history is really important for them to have an understanding, of where we came from. How do we get to this song "Rippin' and Runnin'"? How, what influenced that? And I find that I find that they really enjoy a balance of that. Now I will say that one other tool that I use is this button right here. You see, I've got the solo button here, and it's dicey because Caleb made a comment earlier about embarrassing a student with a comment or with kind of calling them out. We all remember that, don't we? We all remember the feeling of being called on in class, either a music class or otherwise, and not really knowing if we can, come out of there unscathed. Here's what we do. What's what I've done in my bands. I've tried to be so transparent about my strengths, my weaknesses, and that we are all in service of the music, not of our egos. And that if I solo your part and it makes you look a little less than good, this is an opportunity for growth. That's what hard times are. Can you imagine the growth that our country and our world is going through right now? Because of these hard times. We hate them, but that's how we get better. So I talk to these kids and go, we're gonna solo your parts. Listen, professional musicians don't like that. You go into the control room after a playback and the engineer's kind of checking tracks to make sure they're not distorted or whatever. And you hear your part come up and you just go, oh, every time. I still do it too. But I'm trying to set up a culture where soloing and transparency is okay. We are all at one level of the ladder or another. Let's stop trying to be what we are not. Let's try to be gracious and have gratitude about the fact that we get to play music and that we're going to get better. And all we can do is give our best effort, and that's, I think, what we try to set for these kids. And also, as I said earlier, that they are a partner in defining this new way of playing music, this new way of teaching music. And it's a good thing. It's going to be an amazing thing. And when Caleb called me, back in March or February with this idea, I thought, man, what an entrepreneur, what a visionary, And so, that's I have such gratitude to be part of it, and look forward to seeing how it plays out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gordon, and thanks for sharing your expertise with us on this. Really valuable stuff. And we're going to talk some more later this afternoon about some of the things Gordon was addressing about, manipulating time and tuning and what makes sense and this whole process and kind of what our objectives are. And we're going to get into that more this afternoon, but it's really important, I'll just mention this right now, to understand that what we're doing in this format is different than what we were doing in person. In person, we were preparing for a live concert. In this format, we're preparing for a recorded performance. And those are two different things with different objectives and different skills that are developed, which is why I think this is so beneficial and something that we will continue to do long after we're back in person. We are running a little bit behind, so we're going to kind of move a little bit quickly through the topics we have coming up, but I do want to take a short break here to give everybody a chance to use the restroom and grab a quick bite and water and whatever you need. So right now it's 16 minutes past the hour. We're going to go ahead and start again at 25 minutes past the hour, and we're going to move a little bit quickly through some of the topics coming up. So those of you that are presenting, we're going to try to be a little more concise on things and get caught up on the schedule. But we'll be coming back here in just 9 minutes. So we'll see everybody back soon. Thank you so much.